Welcome to another episode of Appalachian Anomalies. On this episode, we're going to be discussing the very popular subject of herbalism. But before I introduce the two guests for tonight, I want to thank everyone for their continued support of the podcast and of the Facebook page. All of the interaction and communications and postings have been very wonderful, and I appreciate it very much. On tonight's show, we're going to have, first, Claire Wyndham. Claire is a granny witch by definition. It goes back far in her family. Second guest this evening will be Jonathan Darby. Jonathan Darby is a professional forager and education director at the Horn Farm Center for Agricultural Education in York, Pennsylvania. So let's just get the ball rolling tonight and get started with Claire Wyndham. Claire, she is a 64-year-old grandmother whose family roots go back to Appalachia all the way to the 1800s. In the 1920s, when her grandmother started moving northward throughout Appalachia, Claire was taught by her grandmother, whose healing arts were passed down over generations to Claire, who's passed them along to her children and now a small amount to us. She states that she likes the magic she puts into her medications. Claire is a true modern-day granny witch. Here's Claire, and I hope you enjoy her as much as I did.
My name is Claire, obviously, and I'm 64. My grandparents came through Appalachia out of Chillicothe, and they followed that path, and then they decided, I guess, to work their way north, and you could follow their, the family's been able to follow their trip out of Chillicothe by the birth records of my aunts and uncles. And so you were able to see how long they stayed here and there by the children being born. Through the years. My grandmother was a very strong witch. When I use the word witch, I'm not talking about the Hollywood version,
right?
Or the scary versions of people that go flying across a full moon on a broom. I'm talking about a witch in its pure natural form that lives from the earth, that comes from the earth, that grows things and has a certain amount of innate ability. I honestly do believe that we, meaning the humans of today, we are born with a certain amount of intelligence that we brought from other lifetimes. And it doesn't get squashed, and we bring it ahead and we nurture it and we use it to grow today. My father was a very strong witch. One of my sons, if you're counting in the hit parade, he would be number 6. Out of the 9 kids that I have, he's extremely strong. I've never seen one stronger, but he turned his back on it. It frightens him, so he turns his back. And that's fine. But I grow things. I beg your pardon, sir?
Well, it's the funny thing, too, is, I'm by faith, I am a Christian, and I go to church and things like that. And when I kind of mention things that all of my family and even my church people know, I'm into weird stuff. Mm-hmm. And the big thing is I love paranormal. I love cryptids. I love, this stuff especially is just kind of where I've started this has fallen into my lap. And the more I seen you and talked to you like through the comments, I just was like, I think I have an actual granny witch here. A big thing about that was I kind of mentioned it and people were like, oh, you're kind of doing the witch thing. And and a lot of people don't understand that, granny witch wasn't, like you said, your boil, toil, trouble kind of witch.
Right.
It was a woman that was the old lady up the hill. That if you got, right. Did you get hurt? Well, go see the old lady up the hill. She's got some plants and she'll take care of you. And
yep.
Or you're sick, and it's hard to explain get people to understand, it's granny witching. It's, your grandma when she used to say, put mustard on the.
Right. It's the way I was raised. And, my grandmother, I like to tell people that not only was my dad a witch, but my grandmother was a witch. And due to the fact that back in the 1890s and 1900s, they didn't have any universities called We Bewitched As You. So she had to learn it from her mother or her grandmother. So this is something that's been brought along out of the last 200 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it is a bad thing, but a lot of people have turned their back on it. And they prefer to go with doctors and they prefer to go with hospitals. Don't get me wrong. I have leukemia. I have cancer. I would never turn my back on technology or the medical miracles that are keeping me alive today. I had a son. Well, I have quite a few of them, but that's not the point. One of my sons was a Marine. I can't even say was. Once you get into that whole Marine Corps thing, it never lets them go.
No,
so they're former Marines. You know what I mean? And believe me, I'll make the mistake of sometimes saying at a family gathering, you guys used to be Marines. And oh my God, does that set them off? No. There's no use to be anything. Okay, whatever. One of them lived through Fallujah. I thought he was going to die. They thought he was going to die. So when I tell you that I'm a witch, but had it not been for the modern miracles of medicine today, I have a son that would have died in another country. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with medicine of today. But I'll tell you right now, even the one who lives through Fallujah, they all know how to use mom's owie cream. They never leave home without it. They all know that, yes, you could take a sleeping pill at night, and yep, you'll go to bed. I guarantee it. If you want a good night's sleep and you don't want the drugs, call mom or go to mom's. Every one of them have tackle boxes that they open up, and there's all kinds of preparations in there from me. I can honestly tell you right now that I have an entire generation, and now the grandchildren. So what is that too? That have never ever had triple antibiotic ointment on them out of the medical field. Like unless they were in the military.
Yeah.
When they were in the military, I couldn't do anything about helping them. And I wouldn't if I could, because, once you become military, you belong to the government.
Yep.
And there's nothing I can do about that.
Right.
But once they're out, then I can say this. They've never had bought an antibiotic ointment on them. They prefer to drink my tea at night. I've got all my babies were raised on catnip tea. It relieves gas. It helped them during the colic. It helped them during teething.
Yeah. Actually, it was in the, we used a holistic, my twins were born extremely early, and we were actually told by the neonatal intensive care unit when they left, and by their follow-up physician, their pediatrician, that they had some of the worst colic, especially the girl that he'd ever seen. And they were given this medicine, and being in the medical field myself, I still prefer not to use man-made drugs if you don't have to. Again, like you said,
right.
If you need them, take them. But
right, I would.
We found an all-natural gas drop, and there was catnip in it and ginger, and I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head right now.
There might have been there probably was a little bit of peppermint and a little bit of some sort of sweetener.
Yeah,
because catnip by itself is not sweet, but if you mix it with lemon balm,
I tasted it.
But see, I didn't know either when I was younger.
It still wasn't
Now
good.
they tell parents, don't give your child honey. Okay. Well, I'm an old lady. I used honey, and they managed to live through it.
Yeah.
Now I got a granddaughter that I'm told, Mom, she's only a year, and I'm told, Ma, you're not supposed to be like that now. Okay, you managed to live, didn't you?
Yeah, to be totally honest, I was that way, and the more I learn about this, and the more we've kind of become more clean eaters, I do buy local real honey from actual beehives and stuff, and honestly, especially my twins, they've always had really severe allergies. When they have it, and we get them to eat it, even if they only do it once every couple times a week, their allergies are almost gone for the whole summer and spring. So I totally believe in it. And just what I have learned so much from researching and kind of getting posts on there, and then that just started throwing this stuff out, and I just couldn't believe what some of these plants could be used for. I remember things with my grandmother going out and picking planting. At that time I was like, this is the nastiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I never did eat it as a kid. I've tried it since. It's not really my cup of tea and taste, but
what's that?
Plantain.
Plantain. Oh,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
plantain,
yes.
plantain. Yeah, I think it's dandelion leaves, isn't it, or something like that? It's still not really
Well,
something that I
no,
like, but
there's a great deal of difference between plantain and dandelion leaves. I am terribly, horribly allergic to dandelion. Okay, I mean the blossoms will send me to the hospital, and when people start mowing their grass, if I am not prepared for it in the spring, I am homebound, isolated, and my face looks like somebody beat me with a 2x4.
oh my.
But if I realize, okay, it's Saturday, most people are mowing their grass, I am not adverse to hitting the Sudafed.
Yeah,
And so I lived through it. But I can tell you right now, I would not be without, I harvest dandelion. See, the blossoms do me in. It's the pollen.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with dandelion root or dandelion leaves. When you realize, that these are medicinal. Now but plantain is not to be confused. And in plantain, we're talking about the green stuff that grows in the Midwest. We are not talking about the cousins to the bananas that the Hispanics use.
Yeah.
It's
got
to
like
fry
a
up. I love
oval-shaped,
fried plantain,
like green
by the way.
leaf and stuff. Yeah, I remember we used to
Right.
pick it by the bagfuls, and I just was like, I'm not eating this.
Oh, no, and I agree with you. But if you now, first thing, a lot of people don't understand is how to harvest it. Anything that you do, anything that you grow, you have to learn how to use it. I mean, just because it's there, it's kind of like having a new car that's sitting in your driveway. If you don't know how to use it, one, it could kill you. And two, how are you going to benefit from having just a car sitting in your driveway? You better know how to put that key in and put it in gear. You have to have responsibility. It's the same with plants that we grow. If you don't know how to harvest it, and if you don't know what parts of the plant are edible, which are not, and some which are not, how are you going to do this? And a lot of people don't because they didn't.
I was totally been dumbfounded by the things that, like I said, there's some plants, the one gentleman was like, well, yeah, you can take that plant and like stuff it and eat it and cook it, but about 40% of the population will have horrible gastric symptoms with it. So,
yes.
And it's like, oh, okay. I don't want to attempt
right.
that. Honestly, that's actually a perfect segue for this with the allergies and stuff, because the one thing that we had talked about was being that allergy season's upcoming and flu and cold still really hitting people.
Mm-hmm.
You had 4 or 5 items you wanted to discuss. So I guess the first one we'll just start with, and I am going to butcher this name. I know it, but is it Echinacea?
No, it's called Echinacea.
Echinacea, okay.
Right, and those are purple cone flowers. Those are the purple, and people will know them when they see them. They might not know what to call them, but everybody sees them. They're the purple daisy-like things in people's garden, or the purple daisies. And they have a middle that's, it's really, it's one of my fun things to do in the fall is watch honeybees try to milk that last little bit from them. And a honeybee is soft and furry, and Echinacea it's Mother Nature's Velcro. And so when the bees land on them, you can go out and actually you have to pick the bee off and send him on his merry way, because otherwise he's just stuck there. Echinacea is a wonderful, wonderful herb. It grows. It's prolific. Once you get it growing, you don't have to take care of it. That's the beauty of Mother Nature. She gives you this stuff. It's up to you to learn how to use it. So when you see purple cone flowers growing in a yard, by all means harvest them. And by that, I mean the leaves. When you look at an Echinacea plant, and what you see is a beautiful purple flower, and you take the flower and you can put it in your home wherever you want it to be. Once you absolutely start using it for colds, and you've got to remember that not everything is for everybody. So when I say to you, please be careful with your Echinacea, I'm not trying to scare you off, but you have to be bright about what you're doing. So the purple cone flower grows, and when you harvest things, I would suggest strongly that you use rubber bands, not string, because as you harvest your leaves, they're nice and full of sap and moisture and things like that. But as they dry, that has to go somewhere. So if you use a rubber band around a group of leaves and you put it on a pegboard or a poster board or whatever you use, as the moisture leaves the plant and it dries, and it will, if you had a string, it would shrink up and fall out and fall on the floor, and you'd get really upset. use a rubber band. As you dry it, what happens is that rubber band becomes still tighter and tighter and tighter. Nothing dries or nothing falls out, and it just shrinks. So when you have your purple cone flowers, by all means, dry them. Use the rubber bands. Pick your leaves. The best time to harvest anything is in the morning after the dew dries off of it and before the afternoon sun hits it. Afternoon sun is far hotter than morning sun. And if you're going to, harvest an herb to use, which is the name of the game, do it at its top, which is the late morning. Now, Echinacea is really good. You pluck the leaves, dry them, and you'll use them to make a tea. And the way you use them is you let these herbs dry, and then you crumble them up, and you can use a tea bag. You can make your own tea bags, or you can use a tea ball or a strainer, just like loose tea. And what this does is it'll loosen the mucus and phlegms in your lungs, allowing you to bring it up quicker. And it's like an expectorant. It allows your lungs to open up. The mucus comes up easier, and you blow your nose, obviously, or, get rid of it. But it is one of the best things out there. Now, what you can use purple coneflowers with, you'll see a lot of people, it's like a cough and cold area of the garden, because you have, do you know what mullein is, or mullein?
Well,
depending on where you're from.
The one we were going to roll into next. I do want to kind of tell people, though, the one I kind of looked up some of the interactions or side effects. Honestly, there isn't a lot with most of these. I will say with the Echinacea,
right, but you have to be careful.
Yeah, it said to be careful with any medication that you're taking for like an autoimmune disease, and then that usually, on average, is nausea or vomiting if you have a reaction, which honestly comes with every medication out on the market. So, nothing actually out of the norm for people. Let's just roll into the mullein now. Now, this is the one said it's known as the velvet plant.
Well, what happens is you'll see this growing. It's an incredible plant, and it goes way back to the Middle Ages. You've got to remember that these are not plants that just perk their heads up. They've been around the block for a while, and it's just we're not using them. People are just now stumbling on them, and they're going, oh, wow, this is cool. No, dude, it came from like the 12th century, the 13th century, and it wasn't just something that popped up. So these are plants that have, that Mother Nature's been giving us for centuries. Only we weren't smart enough to use it. We had a tendency to say, oh, man, let's go with medicine. That is the new kid on the block, and I want to be hip. Okay, knock yourself out. But at the same time, please understand that they have roots, and these roots run deep. So when you start talking about mullein, what mullein is it's that plant that grows that sends those little spikes northward, up to the sky. And none of the flowers all bloom at the same time. They have these little yellow flowers burst open here and there and everywhere. And so then they close up and you go about your business. Now, people used to use those stalks that go up. They would dip them in tallow or in animal fat that they rendered and use them as big candles. Because once you dip them in a tallow, let it soak, bring it out, let it cool. Now when you light it, now what you have is a long candle that will burn for approximately, depending on how long it was soaked and how much you've done, an extended period of time. Definitely is better than, a regular candle that was dipped with a wick. This is a plant that grows, and all parts of the plant. This is one of those plants that are just wonderful because not only do you use the leaves, but you're going to use the blossom and the spike. And that spike is where you'll use it for a candle. If you take the leaves, again, the younger leaves are better. So the younger the leaf, the smaller the leaf, the better the leaf. And that's a good thing. So what you'll do is when you find them growing on the side of the road or in your yard, some people grow them in their yard, or just as you're walking through, the woodlands, pick off the spike at the bottom, down by the earth. Let it hang upside down. When you harvest plants, the reason that you hang it upside down is because all of the medicine, all of the medicinal uses, all of the good stuff, if you will go to the bottom. It won't leach out. So when you pick a plant, the opening where you picked it or the raw end, if you harvested it that way, the sap is going to leak out and you're not going to get it. But if you take the plant, no matter if it's a dandelion plant, elderberry leaves, blackberry, whatever you do, you pick it and you put a rubber band around where it met the stalk. And then you just use a push pin you have, and you'll have an herb. Like I have an area that is just, you've learned through the years how to identify it. But for a lot of people just starting out, they don't know. And that doesn't make them stupid. Not at all. It makes them smarter than most people because they were bright enough to learn that Mother Nature will find a way. And she did. So you take the mullein, you take the leaves, put a rubber band around them and hang them up and let them dry. Now you do the same with that stalk. You want to let it dry. Once the herbs are dry, then you use them. Very few herbs are good fresh off the plant. That doesn't mean that they're not good. It means that the medicinal properties are kind of sort of watered down with all of the plant's natural saps. So once you pick it, now what you do is, as the herb dries, it has a tendency to get rid of the stuff that's not important, concentrating the medicinal part that is important. And so you wrap the rubber band around it and you hang it up whichever way you want. Make a little note of what it is, because you don't want to confuse like comfrey with St. John's wort or whatever you're doing. And just put a little note at the top what it is and go about your business. Now, what you want to do is let this stuff dry. And as it dries, just move it up to the top of the board. Mullein is one of those herbs that you should never go into the fall without, because you need it for your breathing all winter long. Now, if you get a cold and you say to yourself, God, I'm miserable. I have a stuffy nose. I can't understand what I'm doing. I need help. Mullein, make a tea.
Okay, that's what I was getting ready to say. Is it a tea or like?
Well, now there's a lot of different ways. When you harvest plants, there are a lot of different ways to harvest a plant. You can make a tincture, which is a base that you'll have a little eyedropper, and that's a different way of harvesting the herb. You're making it a liquid. And so that when you let's say that you're going to make a tea, you add a couple drops of your tincture. Some plants do better with dried herb, the dried leafy part. Mm-hmm. Some plants do really well with tinctures. It all depends on the person that's absolutely using it. How do you want to use it? Because Mother Nature gives us the plants to use. And the wonderful thing about it is she lets you pick the way you use it. So if you're making a tincture, that's going to be prepared one way, your one tincture, or you dry them and use them as a tea. Either way.
Now, mullein's the one you were going with the Echinacea, that it's basically would be together.
Right.
It would be a cold and cough kind of medicine.
Yep, that's definite. Great. And
I've actually, I looked it up, and I've seen the plant before, and I'm pretty sure it was a plant my grandma used to call the velvet flower or velvet plant.
Well, now, where did your grandma grow up?
Deep in Kentucky.
Then that would be it.
Yeah.
Because, see, there's another plant that's grown out west that people will refer to as the Velvety Plant. Mm-hmm. And what that is the leaves are beautiful gray, and they are gray, and they're soft as velvet. But the one your grandma's talking about is definitely mullein.
Yeah, she said it had, I remember her talking, it was hairy. Like the leaves were always, and then I kind of looked it up and it said one of the big indicators is, like you said, the leaves are bright. Comes in several colors, mostly yellow, it said, but they're 5 symmetrical flower petals. But they said the leaves spiral down and are closer to ground level. And you just amazed me with how much you know about these plants. I looked it up thinking, okay, I wonder if this, and then you say it, and it's just killing me. It's crazy. But yeah, I honestly, with it, the only thing side effects wise it really said was touch it, kind of interact with it, and if you have any kind of a reaction, don't use it. And that was about it. It really had nothing else on there about thing that really showed up other than an allergic reactions and stuff. So yeah.
Now, Native Americans used the mullein in part of their, I don't want to say sweat lodges, but I do want to say as part of the air that they breathed when they were sick.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is that spiked plant. Again, you can cut the spike up, and if it was fresh, cut it up, put it into a container of water, and let it steam.
Yeah,
so you're breathing
it's like
in
an ancient vaporizer. Yeah,
Yep.
That's
and so you got to remember that a lot of times people would have a fireplace or a potbelly stove. And we were raised on a potbelly stove. And in the winter, Mother would take galvanized bucket, because we didn't really have access to tin cans. But she would take the galvanized bucket, put water in it, and she would put herbs in it that it would steam into our house all day long. So you just kind of breathed it everywhere you went. It was almost like once you came in, you didn't have to have the medicine poured into a cup because you were breathing it. And so when you go to sleep at night, you'd still breathe that in. It didn't smell like Vicks vaporizer. And there's nothing wrong with Vicks, by the way. I absolutely love it. And I've tried countless ways for me to incorporate it into my winter.
Actually, I found one that was made with mostly herbal and plant-based stuff that it worked, but yeah, there's just something about old Vicks that's been around so long. They figured that out.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. But the nearest I can get is a spearmint base, because I can grow mints everywhere. Mints are so invasive in your garden. Be very cautious when you plant them, because as much as you need them for medicine, once you get them in your garden, they just go everywhere they want. Yeah. So my answer to that is put a bucket in the ground, like a plastic wash tub, put that in the ground, and put dirt in the wash tub, put your herb in there, your peppermints. They can only grow that far. But definitely put some peppermint in there. And like, if you decide that you wanted to make a nice, tea to sip to make you feel better, by all means, grow your comfrey. That's a good herb for coughs and colds. Comfrey is wonderful.
The next one that you had brought up was mustard plasters.
Oh my gosh, mustard plasters!
Yeah, which is topical, right?
I didn't know. I did not honestly know that not everybody used them.
I have never even heard of it, and it's a topical thing, right?
It is.
Okay. So
and what it was is, my father was a lumberjack, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. He was a hardwood cutter. He would go out in the morning, and he'd have to light fires under his tractors so they would thaw out in the winter, so he could get things going to get out to cut the lumber to bring it into the sawmill. My dad was used to working in the woods, so that he could not be down. Our lives depended on my father working in the woods. So when he would get a cold, there was none of this calling in crap. And so what grandmother did all her life, and I thought it was normal, they would take and mix dry mustard that you just, Coleman's dry mustard that's been around forever, with flour and water, and make a paste. Now, once that mustard was interacted with the flour and water to make this paste, Father would lay down, or us kids would lay down, and Mother would take an old T-shirt or an old piece of flannel or something like that. You'd put it on your chest. You put the mustard plaster, or you put the mustard mixture on the flannel, fold the flannel shirt over it, and you just lay there for a little bit. And you could not wear it long because it would burn the skin. The actual heat would go through the flannel and burn the skin, and you would have this red outline of, whatever your mother used. And it would drive the heat into your lungs. Now you're taking an expectorant between the mustard plaster on the outside and the expectorant that you're taking. You wouldn't be sick long. Overnight.
Again, the one side effect I could only find, and I was like, I'll put this in there in case it doesn't come up, is the possible light first degree burns to the skin.
Yes.
I'm telling you, people, listen to this lady. She knows this stuff.
It's the way I was raised. It's a mustard plaster.
Now,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry. Another thing I'd seen for it was really good. It said for like arthritic pain.
Yeah, because there are a lot of herbs, and I'm not, because of the nature of them on this particular program, I'm not going to get into them, because if you use them, the line from being deadly to being useful is so slim that unless you've been doing it a long time, you don't realize where to stop. So we're going to bypass a few of those. But when you use, there's a lot of herbs that generate heat or, medicinal properties that go down and it'll work into your joint. And arthritis is just that. It's an inflammation of the joint where the two bones meet, and the synovial liquid allows you to move. As we get older, or we've damaged it, the synovial liquid escapes. Now we have bone on bone, which kind of irritates and it gets inflamed, hence the arthritis. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
But mustard plasters work very good for even if it's a small area, like if you've got a hip problem or a knee problem. This is not for just bumps and bruises. Like if you fell, well, I guess it could. If you fell in the parking lot or something like that. What you'll do is, like I said, you just take, if you were going to make a small one for a knee or your hip, you would just take like a quarter of a cup of flour and a teaspoon of dry mustard and mix those two together and then add enough liquid to make this nasty looking goppy paste. And that's the only way I can, it's not pretty. Okay, I never said it was.
I've seen some of the photos of what the paste looked like on people. And it looked kind of like they messed themselves. So,
so that's why I say you want to put that. Absolutely, you want to put that T-shirt down, or you want to put that flannel down. A towel is too thick because the heat can't generate through that.
Okay,
and some people will they actually use a Vicks first on their lungs or on their back, because you can put this on your upper back. If you're laying on your stomach, put it on your upper back, or you can lay on your back and have some, put it on your chest. Either way.
Right. So you basically you put it on the thin cloth and put it on. You don't directly put it on your skin.
Right.
Okay.
You make like a sandwich. You have the cloth up first, and then you put the filling in, and you put the top on it like a piece of bread, and you sit there and you wait, or you lay there and you wait, and it starts heating up, and you'll feel so good. And because you know how like when you're sick anyway, you feel like crap. And now this is a giant warm heating blanket that just starts heating up. And then now I do know for a fact that you can't use the same mustard plaster. Like if you took it off your chest and you said, I'm going to roll over. Somebody put that on my back, please. It doesn't seem to work as well. I don't know if there's like a shelf life for that dry mustard to interact. And so once you hit like the 30-minute mark, it degenerates. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that
you have to
that's the big guns.
A new one for each use?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say it's more of like an activator. And then once the activator kicks in, it's just got it, so
absolutely. It's not like an ice pack.
Because it
generates
heat.
It's not like an ice pack.
Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And you're fine. You're fine. But again, that's when the mustard plasters came out, you knew in my family that it was big guns. Okay. There's certain levels of a cold. And when you break out the mustard plasters, you're beyond the chicken soup help. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, I'll have to be careful with this one. Like I was saying, my wife gets addicted to heating pads, and she knows there's a natural way to get heat generated. I have to keep it from her. But so I guess moving on along with this, man.
I would make, if it was, and it has been, my children and my grandchildren now, because I value their lives beyond anything. And when we go to the market, Grandma, can I have? Grandma, can I have? And I get that. I do. Marketing is everything. But I don't want them taking all that extra stuff in their body.
Right.
So for me, I'll make them a tea of willow bark. I keep that on all the time. Willow bark with some dandelion in it, maybe some elderberry or blackberry leaves, depending on what I got. Depending on the time of day, maybe some skullcap. I'll throw in there some chamomile. Catnip tea is good to go to bed with. Or horehound. Now, horehound is a good cough expectorant. Okay? Back in the day when people didn't have a lot, they make horehound candy drops.
Mm-hmm.
They sweetened them, and there was the flavor of the horehound. Well, then, if you got sick, you also made a horehound tea, using the leaves again, not the roots in this case, not the roots at all. And you would use the horehound, maybe some echinacea, like I said, depending on what your garden grew. But if I was going to grow a garden or a patch in my garden of just cold and herbal, remedies for cold and flu, not the flu, because you got to remember with the flu, you're vomiting. It's a virus, or it's an infection. You're sick. It's your stomach. Nothing settles well. So that's kind of different than a cold. Cold is usually isolated to the lungs. But yeah, you got to watch out for the flu. That's when the chicken soup and ginger, and depending on the area you live in. I'm in upper Wisconsin, and I can't get it here locally. But in Kentucky, and I do know in certain parts of Appalachia, they are still harvesting, friendly, good harvesting. Now that, to me, being access to golden seal when you're sick is like pure gold. It's rare.
Yeah, man, we're gonna have to do this again. For the horehound, I will say that is the one that I honestly, even to this day, I actually like the taste of it. And for people who haven't tried it, it's kind of got not a strong, but like a black licoricey kind of taste. They do sweeten it a little, that helps. But I'm going to tell you, Mel, now it is better than any cough drop on the market. It's good for your stomach when my stomach's been upset.
Yep. Now, so you can make it.
It is one that I do use every year, especially once
you should
and stuff. And it's a great one. And you can pretty much buy it at any store. That's what I think a lot of
you can grow it.
Yeah.
If you grow it in your yard or throw it in your garden, you only need one plant, I assure you, because it sends out runners. It grows really nice and tall once it gets established. Put it in the back of your garden, up against a fence line or something. It'll look beautiful as it grows, and nobody needs to know that this is part of your garden. But yes, fresh horehound is one, and horehound cough drops is good, and horehound tincture is good. And horehound sweetener, if you didn't want a horehound tea, you wanted your own tea, make some horehound syrup, the syrup itself, and add a teaspoon to your tea.
Yeah, this one I'll probably definitely try more of the uses that you have mentioned. And stuff. Now to the one, was so happy that you mentioned this last one, because where I work, we're having some flu issues with a lot of the patients and with a lot of the staff. And one person came in and they were like, "How did you get over it so quick?" And she told everybody, and of course at first it was kind of like, "Oh, you're crazy," kind of look. I think some of the young ones gave her. She brought in elderberry tea, elderberry syrup, and she has got everybody there like coming after this stuff. And I'm seeing it firsthand.
Yep.
But I do know now with elderberries, and I know you're going to know this, there is something about you have to be careful.
Well, now, hold on, before you go any further. See, that's how granny witches came about, because we knew crap that nobody else believed.
Yeah.
And sure enough, when they finally broke down and came to us and tried it, just like in your facility, people laughed at first. They're not laughing now.
No, she has people all over Facebook asking her where she got it and what one to get and stuff. But I do know, like I said, there was something about elderberries I had read
berries that
you got to be careful.
The berries. Yep. You want a specific, if you're going to drink it and really make tea, you want the black elderberries, not the red.
Okay.
The black elderberry, and I can't remember the Latin name of it, But the second part of it definitely denotes the blackberry. Thinking right now, Nigella? No, it can't be Nigella. It starts with an Nig. The second word starts with an Nig of the Latin name for it. And see, that's kind of like, don't confuse mulberries. Same thing with mulberries, which my grandkids always do.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly couldn't pick an elderberry, mulberry, or a huckleberry probably out of the crowd from either one
sure.
of them.
All you need to do is see it one time. All you need to do is see it one time. Because I use elderberries and mulberries, if you want the truth, as a tenderizer for my pork.
For your pork?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about looking it up for the cooking at the time. But I just...
Yeah, if you take them... If you take them and mash them up.
Saying how well she was doing, it caught like wildfire. And I know for a fact that there's at least 5 or 6 people now taking it to work with them to use it while they're there to prevent, and it's prevented. I mean, they haven't got it, and she got over it like within a day or two. And
so what you want to do is when the elderberries come on, you pick them, make a nice syrup, cap the syrup, stick it in your cupboard in the dark. Go about your business, because you get them in the summer when you never get a cold. See, that's the problem too, is you don't always anticipate things. You don't anticipate being sick. So in the summer, when everything is going good, you're more concerned with growing your fruits and vegetables in your garden and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where you should be looking at the future. How am I going to feel in January and February? You're going to feel like crap if you get sick. Harvest the elderberries. Make the syrup and put it away. That way you got it.
It's one that I'm probably going to do. I'm going to look those up a lot more, because with just watching it happen with these few people and how quick she got over it and stuff, and it's been quite fascinating. And plus,
what
honestly,
I would suggest you,
like I tell people all the time, knowing this stuff is something good, that if ever anything really horrible happens, you kind of have an idea of where to go to get some medicine when there is no medicine.
What I would suggest, though, on your show is maybe late in the summer when all this stuff starts coming to fruition, all the berries and everything are ripening, maybe you should also do another one on what to pick then. It's
already there. You've blown me away. I've already kind of, was like, I'm going to get back with you here later soon. Claire, you have really blown, like I said, I keep saying this word, but I mean, reading your stuff, you read it and it's like, wow, she really knows a lot. But hey, is she Googling it and sending it? But you're just spitting it out like it's a book in your head. And I'm blown away about your knowledge on this stuff. And,
it's a lot of it has to do also with the fact that I am a professional reenactor for the Middle Ages. And I'm an herbalist in our group. So I give seminars on the herbs and the plants that were grown in the 1300s and 1400s and how they used them then. And it's easy for me to see, as being a witch myself and going to these things and now talking to you, it's all one big plan. Mm-hmm. It's good. Yeah. Herbs are good.
I can't tell you thank you enough. It's been absolutely fascinating. On the page, as you've seen, this was 2 of the areas that kind of blew up. Once I started putting the herbal and the medicinal plants, it's like it started growing into this like plant, like a plant, and it just took over. And I was so amazed on how many people really, really wanted to know more about these plants and how many people actually used them the way that, I was researching and finding. Really blew me away. And then I met you on there and threw me a curveball into the fact that I was like, wow, I think I'm really I'm getting to know a real granny witch here, that this person uses this, seems to be on a daily basis. And
I do.
Yeah.
No, we do.
I'm speechless.
I appreciate that.
I'm really speechless, and you're not supposed to be that way on these shows, but I'm more about it just kind of being raw and down to earth. Because even if it's just for learning myself, I'm walking away of this already. I was scratching notes as fast as I could as you were talking. I appreciate it so much, Claire. And for everybody on the show and on the page, Claire's in both the page and on the town hall group. If you need on any of them, shoot me a message on my private account. It's Josh Riggs. It's personal. It's not private. Or just search up the Appalachian Anomalies podcast on Facebook. You'll come to the page and you start posting things there. And I promise you, Claire will have a great, great response to it. I promise you that. Claire, I want to thank you very much for your time. And thank you so much for knowing all this stuff. And, you know, your kids and grandkids are very lucky to have you in their lives. I will promise you that. And it kind of makes me have a little bit of regret in not listening to my grandma more when I was younger.
Don't regret. We're out there.
Yeah.
We're out there. And you know what? Your grandma, she would have passed on to you the same knowledge that I have. We're all grandmas together.
Yeah. She did a lot, but you know, when you're a kid, you're like, I'm not eating that. The dog pees in the yard. I'm not, you know what I mean? And, you know, and it does. It's, you know, sitting here, it's bringing back a lot of memories of, you know, little things that she's told me and I've used to this day, but some of this other stuff was way over my head. The best thing that's happened to me lately, herb-wise, last year when the St. John wort came on, of course, everybody knows it. I'll go find it and I'll pick it. But my granddaughter, she actually said to me, can I go picking with you St. John's wort? And I said, since when? She said, Grandma, I want to know. Because usually I have to pay them to get them to go with me. But, Grandma, I want to know what I'm doing. All righty then. Let's get started. So I don't know. Maybe there's hope for the generation yet. But there is. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. I appreciate any chance at all to pass on herbs so that somebody might want to say, maybe I'll just sow that in the garden this year. Yeah.
That would be great.
I can't say thank you enough. The pleasure is all mine. With all the 9,000 other things that you told me about that you do, and I still just can't get my mind past how you even sleep. I think one of those things, you know, should be a book. To be totally honest, I would buy it in a heartbeat. I've tried to put a book together on a lot of things. Just when you adopt children and you have foster children, and you live 3 lives in one small life, you know, 3 lifetimes in one small life, I get too scattered, and I can't go back and establish the, you know, like when the time my grandma used this on me, and you know how to make the chickweed ointment and stuff like that. Yeah. Ointments are something that are very near and dear to me. So, yeah, that's my specialty. With that, I've found, like, even with these kind of with these shows and such, it seems to be the ones that people like the most are that. I think it's because it seems more real, more like it's down to earth, you know, not like I'm going to use this big word and I get a thesaurus and a dictionary and all that around. I think, honestly, it would work. I think the scattered thing, but like if you know, would work, honestly, in this situation. Yeah. But Claire, I do want to thank you so much for this.
Again, Josh, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me.
Absolutely,
expound.
And I hope to get you back on, like you said, maybe sometime in the summertime to kind of talk about what needs to be being put out for the future of the
Not a problem, sir.
Yep. Claire,
I wish you, your wife, and your children the best.
Yeah, thank you, and same to you. I hope everything works out with the stuff that you have to use the medicine for. Well, I hope you all enjoyed Claire as much as I did. Our next guest tonight is Jonathan Darby. Jonathan Darby is a wild food enthusiast and educator. He's the former owner and operator of Sterling Farms CSA. Jonathan has been active in local farming communities since 2006. He began dabbling with foraging almost 20 years ago and has been leading foraging classes and hikes for the past 10 years. Jonathan is the education director at the Horn Farm Center for Agricultural Education in York, Pennsylvania. I hope every one of you enjoy his part as much as I have enjoyed talking with him. He has a wealth of information, especially about one particular plant that everyone was highly interested in. So without further ado, here's John.
Yeah, so hey, it's really great talking today. My name is John Darby, and I do a bunch of things, but I work for a farm education center called the Horn Farm Center in York, Pennsylvania. I'm the education director there, and my job, I always describe it as I'm part farmer, part project manager, part educator, and one part of my educational focus at the farm is, wild plants, which you wanted to talk about today.
The big thing, like we've discussed, is the herb thing just took off on the Facebook page and seems to be a high interest. So when you contacted me about being a professional forager and stuff, a synchronicity, as we like to quote, occurred in my brain and was like, I need to speak to this man as soon as possible. So really the big one, the big plant that like everybody seems to love the information about is dandelions. So I guess we should start with the top of the hill here on what everybody wants to hear and get your information, input, and like, I guess, ideas on what how to find it, how to pick it, use it, and things like that.
So I think that's a great one to start with for various reasons. A lot of times when I do classes, I often do this sort of visual survey at the beginning of my class where I'll say, hey, how many of you have any experience with foraging? Put your hand in the air. And if you've got lots of experience, put your hand up really high. If you've got just a little bit, keep it low. And a lot of the monthly classes I teach have fairly beginning folks coming out for it. Dandelion is one that I recommend they all start with for a number of reasons. It's very prolific, throughout North America. It is often easy to identify for most people. Like even folks who don't really know much about plants can often identify dandelions in their yard or they just know the flower. And so it's a little easier to start with. The entire plant's edible and usable, so there's no bad part of the plant for people to, mess up with. It's a really easy beginner plant to start with.
So in using all of the plants, what specific parts can be used for, like specific things? I guess maybe to start, what would be some of the medicinal value of it?
Well, it's a really fantastic detox plant, and so it emerges in the spring. It's a perennial, so that means it grows year after year. And in the spring, it comes up, and it's kind of a nice spring tonic. So the greens you can eat in a salad, and it's a good detox plant. It cleans your liver, and it's just really a nice way to kind of get rid of all the junk you've collected all winter while you've been sitting inside eating potato chips or whatever it is you're doing. And whether you're using it as a tea plant and making a tea out of the leaves or eating it a salad or a cooked green, it's a wonderful detox plant. So that's the primary thing I think about it from like a medicinal health standpoint. It's also good for headaches. So the leaves of the dried flowers, nice in the tea for that. I do a sort of a headache tea mix because I get migraines. That's one of my components to that, along with some other things. And got so many different ways to use it and ways to appreciate it. The other reason I like it as a way for people to start is that it is super abundant. And in the foraging world, there's these handful of things that are sort of the buzzwords for foraging, like the morels and the switcher ramps. And in some areas, those are pretty uncommon, especially the wild leeks. And so something like dandelion, you're never going to over-harvest it or damage the population of it. It's kind of eat all you want, they'll make more kind of a thing.
With now, do you use the flower in the teas or?
Yeah, okay. I love the flower. The yellow flower, when it's you find the right area, you can have an entire hillside painted yellow. Go through, collect all the flowers. You can use it in a tea. You can, if you've ever heard of dandelion wine, that's what they're using. They're using the flower, so you can make a wine or a mead with it, which is really nice. And I've actually fermented them like you would. Most people, when they think of fermented foods, they think sauerkraut. And so you can use that same technique and use that for a lot of wild greens or wildflowers. And I did a couple of years ago, I did a huge batch of fermented dandelion flowers, and they were pretty phenomenal as like a side dish.
Yeah, I like sauerkraut, so I'd probably be willing to try it.
Yeah, it's got that same kind of tang to it, and really good.
Because one of the things that's confused me about it is I read that and I get kind of lost into the amount of information there is about dandelions. I was just so amazed by that. But I could never make out for sure, was like, are they using that yellow flower? Because honestly, if anyone smelled it, it doesn't have the most wonderful of odors sometimes. So I could
wow. I'm going to challenge you to smell that again this spring.
Probably need to, because that's when I was a kid. Honestly, I haven't picked them in many, many years and sniffed them. So yeah, you're probably right.
Well,
I probably should.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this too. Like, dandelion is known as a bitter green, so it is kind of bitter. Mm-hmm. When I first got into foraging, which my early 20s, which is now a good couple decades ago, the dandelion was way too bitter for me. I was like, hey, there's dandelion, let me eat that. And I couldn't really hack the bitterness of it. but I knew it was really good for me, so I kind of kept at it. And one thing I tell people is that your taste buds will change. Like in this culture, we eat so much sweet and so much salt, and we're not really used to bitter, which is one of the main flavors, which is really good for us. And now, like years later, I crave the bitterness. And if we get a hard winter and all the dandelion is kind of knocked back for the winter, I'll really be itching for spring when it pops back up and I can get some.
Yeah, well, yeah, again, it's one of the top three. We have sweet, sour, and bitter is the three taste areas of our tongue. So obviously it's something our body does need. So with those the flower one is really fascinating. So like when you make the tea, do you have to dry it? Because I've heard someone said they boiled them and drank the
yeah,
broth.
If you think of what a tea is just plant matter boiled in water and strained so that you're getting all the essence of the plant matter, whether it's any kind of plant that you're making, like is what the technical word for a tea is a tisane. Like when we say tea, most people are thinking of the tea plant, Camellia sinensis, which is used in green tea and black tea. But you can make a tea out of any plant, So yeah, when you're making a tea with it, just you taking that yellow flower, you're putting your tea kettle on and getting the water hot, and then you're pouring it over maybe in a mug or a bowl, dandelion flowers, and letting it steep for a bit, and then straining it out and drink away.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to try that, just because I'm going to take you at the challenge and re-sniff them and see if we get past it. Because recently I have discovered that I love vegetables and plant stuff more than I used to.
Yeah.
So this headache migraine thing, I know so many people that have migraines. I'm very curious on what your little tonic is there for that. If you're willing to tell.
So everyone, folks who get migraines, they get them for different reasons. So obviously I can't say this is going to work for everyone. A couple of plants that I use a lot for headaches is primarily wild lettuce, which has a lot of good medicinal qualities to it, and it is a good pain reliever. And so I've been working in the field and I've had a headache kick in, and I'll actually just eat the raw wild lettuce from the field, and it helps quite a bit. But I will dry it. It's got like a latexy midrib, so it's a little hard to get fully dry. But I'll dry wild lettuce and dandelion primarily, and then I usually throw in a couple just soothing herbs in there, like chamomile. I'll even put in a little chickweed, a couple other things just for flavor. I'm a big holy basil fan, so I'll be putting that in almost all the teas I make, even though that's not really a wild plant around here. I do grow that, but dandelion and the wild lettuce specifically for the headache is I've gotten a lot of relief from that. It's really nice.
I'll have to check on it. Yeah, if you're having a hypertension headache, of course, obviously it's a different situation. Seek a doctor, of course.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Now, the other way to use dandelion for that is the root itself. I do a lot of root harvest. I usually like to go into winter having pounds and pounds of root dug up, and I'll grind it and dry it. And so the root itself, you can roast it and then put it through a coffee mill, and then you have this powder, which is dandelion coffee, essentially. It doesn't have caffeine in it, but it's a nice way to add sort of a headache tonic and a detox to your normal coffee in the morning. Oh. So that's another way to utilize it.
Okay, so with the roots, when you take them up, what do you do? Like, is there a specific way you clean them and then hang them or things for drying, or?
Yeah, they'll be, there's a lot of ways to do this. My normal routine is I dig up as much root as possible, cut the roots off. The greens get saved for cooked greens or salad. And then the roots, I'll put in, I may have a bucket full of root, and I'll fill that bucket with water and then just kind of agitate and shake around those roots to get them as much of that mud and dirt off as possible. Mm-hmm. Then I pull it out and strain it, and then I'll take a knife and chop that root up into big chunks. And then those big chunks go back into the bucket with water again and agitate that. So sort of a second washing. At that point, I usually have as much of the soil off as I'm going to get. And I also don't mind if there's a little bit left on there, because it's actually good minerals in that. And so if my roots are a little dirty, I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
From there,
it's the old adage of put some dirt on it, you'll be okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as long as if you're digging from a clean place, which you should be anyway, if you're foraging for the roots, a little soil will kill you. Yeah, I take those chunks that I just washed the second time, and then I actually put those through a food processor, and that gets everything down to like a fine grind and all of it a similar size. And then from there, it goes onto like a cookie sheet, for example, usually about a 1/4 inch thick, and it goes in the oven for 250 degrees for about 2 hours. And that first hour is really just going to be drying it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that second hour will be roasting it. So if you just wanted to dry it, you could take it out after an hour, make sure it seems pretty dry. But if you leave it in for that second hour, it's roasted, and it'll reduce in size down to about 1/4 or 1/3 of what you started with.
Okay.
And then from there, you can cut through your coffee grinder and use it as coffee, or you could keep it in the form it's in and use it as a tea, get a little tea ball.
I'm going to get me one of these tea balls. You're probably the 4th person in 2 days I've heard mention the word tea ball.
Yeah, they're pretty handy for, using fresh herbs or dried herbs that you've harvested yourself that don't come in one of those store-bought tea bags, right? So it's kind of a staple in our home. We also use like a big strainer, because a lot of times when I make tea out of wild plants, I'll use like a spaghetti pot and do a huge batch in there and then pour it through a strainer and then have a glass of hot tea, and the rest can go into a pitcher in the fridge and becomes cold tea for later.
All right, well, to the foraging part. When you are out, like you said, like make sure you're in a clean area. I mean, outside of like going to the woods, which is as clean as it can be, with all the wood life there. How can you ensure, like you said, where you walk up to a hill and you see it's covered in dandelions? What kind of things do you want to look for to make sure that it isn't like a clean space? Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because it is hard these days to find an area because, pollution and toxins aside, there's also the legalities behind it. So you're either on public lands where sometimes there's rules in place, or you're on private property and you want to make sure you have permission to be there, or if you're lucky enough, you have a backyard or a house yourself, you can kind of let go with some things. But my general rule from a pollution standpoint is when it comes to roadsides, you really want to be like 30 to 50 feet back from the roadside. It's not that long ago in our history of our culture that we had lead in our gasoline. Yeah. And that stuff persists, and that's not something that you want to be ingesting. One of the key skill sets to kind of cultivate as a forager is just observation, not only for being able to like observe where plants are growing and where you might want to come back other times, but also when you get to an area and you think, I want to harvest food from this place, like what is happening on that land? What is happening uphill? What is happening upstream? And not only thinking about current realities of that land, but what, if you have the knowledge, what happened in the past? Because a lot of parks, state parks and whatnot, are great areas for finding plants, but some of those used to be landfills and they're building parks on top of them. And so as much as possible, know what is happening on the land, know what used to happen on the land, what's happening still upstream from the land. In there's going to be some weird equation that's based on your comfort level. So, because you're not always going to have that information, but you do the best you can. Right. Yeah, I know, because I know there's a place close to my home. It's a very beautiful wooded area. You go back, there's plants everywhere and everything. But if you're in there long enough, you realize there's no animals ever. Mm-hmm. And not to get into it's Bigfoot, but it's not at this time. What it actually was is they're non-nuclear, but they put non-active warheads and buried them. Wow. When they built this hill for the road that goes through there. So somewhere down in there, you get far enough back, there is a sign that says, private government property, be warned that there are inactive, missiles. I can't remember how it reads and stuff. And you get back there, you don't even see a squirrel. That's a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. So that when you said that really kind of, clicked with me. That would definitely be, outside of knowing that, but not seeing any animals in the area should kind of a telltale sign that something's wrong with it. Well, one of the reasons that a lot of wild plants are so medicinal and so good for you from a nutrition and vitamin standpoint is that a lot of them are just really, really good at pulling up, minerals and things from the soil. And that also means they're good at pulling up toxins too. And so, we really want to make sure that we're harvesting food for our bodies from areas that are clean and a place that you would be comfortable planting a garden in other words. Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense. That would be the best way to look at it. Yeah. If you're not comfortable digging it up and planting something there, don't pick it there either. So that's actually a really good one to think of. Didn't even think of that. So it's getting summertime. It's getting warm weather. This kind of came from a discussion with somebody else. What kind of plants can you forage to help maybe with like some weight loss kind of stuff? Is that something that you would know? I mean,
Well, I don't know that I can really speak to the weight loss side of things. As far as diabetes goes, that is the other thing you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so as far as diabetes would go, the first thing that comes to mind is Jerusalem Artichoke, which is a flowering plant in the aster family. It's a wild sunflower that instead of producing seeds, I mean, it does produce seeds, but instead of sort of the stereotypical sunflower seeds we think of up top, it propagates primarily through tubers in the ground like a potato would.
Uh-huh.
And this is a wild plant that grows from, northern Florida up to like the southern Canada on the East Coast. It was a staple crop to a lot of the indigenous that lived here. If you have it in your area or want to plant some in your area and let it kind of go wild, it's a great plant for diabetes. It's mainly because it's a tuber. So, folks with diabetes can't eat or shouldn't eat, I guess, a lot of potatoes because they're full of starches, and the starches turn to sugars and it can kind of throw blood sugar off. Whereas the tuber of the Jerusalem artichoke has inulin in it. So it's a nice substitute for potatoes. And it's a little different. You can use it the same way as a potato, but it does have sort of a different texture and flavor. But it's a great, calorie crop that you can harvest in the wild if you find them.
And it was called the Jerusalem Artichoke?
Yeah, and it's kind of a misnomer. It's called Jerusalem Artichoke, but it's not related to artichokes, and it's not from Jerusalem. So there's a story behind that. But it was. At some point it was brought from the quote-unquote New World to back to Europe and became kind of a commodity that was traded around and passed around and became quite popular. And at some point while passing through Italy, there was some miscommunication because the Italian word for sunflower is girasol, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that the way they would. Someone heard girasol and thought they said Jerusalem, and it stuck. And I can't tell you where the artichoke came from. It doesn't taste like an artichoke. It doesn't look like an artichoke.
I was going to say, does it look like one?
No, not really.
I'm more confused on how even if you're half right with the word, where did they get Jerusalem from that word still?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have an intern on my crew this year, and she speaks Italian fluently. And when she says sunflower in Italian, when she says girasol, it sounds like Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
So
now I'm about to
it's my lack of Italian pronunciation that's not able to convey that. So.
Don't worry, I can barely pronounce in English sometimes. So one thing I will say that I had multiple people ask when I was kind of talking to them that I was going to have someone who was a professional forager on is, a lot of people nowadays, as we talk to the messages, are really worried about like everything collapsing. So from that standpoint, what kind of plants, should someone look at to like, that would be like able to be stored longer and also have like a good, like helping with meeting like a caloric and nutritional need over, let's say you're without food for like a week or so. What would be some to look at or to kind of have set back at that, if the situation was to arrive?
Yeah, and I've thought about that quite a bit too. I'm definitely not someone that I don't consider myself to be a prepper per se. Yeah. I do have strong thoughts on civilization and where it's heading and where it may or may not go, depending on things changing. And the nice thing about foraging that I've found is that there really is food everywhere once you learn to look for it and know what you're looking at. We can sit here for hours and talk about all the amazing sort of greens and things like that you can harvest, and there's food, an amazing abundant level out there, but greens aren't going to help you in a survival situation. You need more calories and things like that. So I think finding the roots is pretty important. I also think jumping sort of off of the foraging thing a little bit is honestly learning hunting and trapping skills, and also crossing that sort of cultural boundary that tells us we shouldn't be eating insects. We have an insect eating class coming up at the farm center this year, and we did it last year, and it's really helpful to realize that that's a food source if we can kind of get over that ick factor that a lot of us are trained into. But I think really just starting from a standpoint of learning the area that you're in, what is growing here, because regionally there's going to be differences.
Right.
and trying to propagate things now that we know we could use later if needed. Are there staple crops in my area like nut trees and things like that? How can we plant more of those? So we have, because of the way we live as a culture and as a planet at this point, we've really damaged the ecologies that we live in. And so a lot of the woodlands that we live in are highly degraded. They don't have the food sources that they once had, even from a wildlife standpoint. And so trying to repair those places now and increase the carrying capacity of those places, I think, is really important. There's a pretty strong component to foraging that needs to be sort of tending the land and helping to give back. And if we're harvesting from it, we want to be able to help. If I'm harvesting from a plant that I find useful, then I want to be able to replant that as I go and help spread seeds and help make sure that that continues to be a food source. So that may have strayed a little bit off of your question.
No, actually, I wasn't. I mean, you hit it exactly, because I knew like you couldn't like specify a plant because I'm Southern Ohio, you're Pennsylvania, things like that, which most of it through that area, especially the foothills and stuff of the mountains, are a lot similar. But the thing I really liked was the fact that basically it's the roots that, well, I guess the roots would be a good idea anyway, because you can dry them and you could even airtight seal them, I guess would be the way to look at it. So the roots are where the calories are, is kind of
and even seeds to a certain extent, like learning how to harvest wild grains and things like that you can. What are the staple crops we eat now, and how can we replicate that in a wild form, is a really important way to be thinking. And I'll tell you, I don't want to pass judgment on anyone's lifestyle or diet, because we're all different and we all have different needs and viewpoints. But I spent many years as a vegan, and I'll tell you, I'll never go back to that. In a post-civilization scenario, we need to eat from all the kingdoms, is my opinion. Yeah,
especially at that time, because the protein is something that's extremely important for keeping your body healed. And again, I know people that are vegans that are wonderfully healthy, and I know people that are they tried it and got really, really sick, and it's just really because everybody's different, like you said, nobody processes food in the same ways. As for the other, like when you said insect and hunting, I know the word foraging is more of a plant thing, but I kind of throw that all together. So when I'm thinking of foraging, it's going out in nature and finding food. So on that, I totally agree with. As for the insects, I will tell you, I have eaten grasshoppers, I've eaten ants, and I've eaten mealworms. And if anybody hasn't tried them, like you said, you got to really get past the ick factor. Now, we had to eat them raw for a class. It was a survival class I took as an elective. There really isn't much juicy stuff that you think. And honestly, they tasted like almost like bland peanuts. That's kind of how I got it. Yeah, especially the mealworm. Not a bad description. Yeah, the mealworm was like it had a nut flavor, but it was just bland, like a blah. Like if you weren't going to be like, oh, this is delicious. And then I did have roasted mealworms, which were delicious, but they were seasoned with salt and pepper and stuff. At that time, though, we were encouraged to keep an A by eating a grub, and I didn't get an A. So, ick factor aside, no. And
I have eaten grubs, and they're not pleasant. I'll admit that.
No, I'll starve.
So. Yeah, I did eat my first cockroach last year, and I'll tell you what, that's a good food source.
Man, I don't know.
Yeah, we sauteed cockroaches and mealworms in peppers and onions, and
okay, that I might try. That I may try.
Yeah, yeah.
But just thinking of the word cockroach, wow.
Yeah.
But again, if you don't try, you don't know. So
yeah,
I will tell people, if someone offers you ants and grasshoppers and mealworms, it's really not that bad. It really is.
The ants are fantastic. The ants are kind of lemony. They have that kind of lemony pop crunch to them once you toast them up.
Yeah, they taste like. I'm trying to think. When I ate them, it's been several years. I remember saying they tasted like, can't remember what it's called. I guess it would be like a Crystal Light. I guess, and if you one packet of Crystal Light and had too much water, and like a giant bottle, it kind of had that just light tangy But, again, nothing squirts. And that's what I was surprised, even raw, alive and stuff. And again, my taste buds could have been messed up because I drank a lot of Mountain Dew back then. But
that'll affect that. But.
Yeah. So, now you got me in on the insect thing with this foraging stuff. I'm all over the place. So that being said, so we've mentioned ants, grasshoppers, cockroaches. We're going to avoid the whole grub situation totally. I guess with the foraging while you're digging roots, have you done the earthworms?
I have eaten earthworms. I haven't eaten them raw, to be honest, but I have eaten them in soup. And once they're cooked up in a soup, they're just kind of like noodles. Yeah, I mean, I kind of got past the point years ago where anything kind of grosses me out. And really, eating the cockroach was sort of the last hurdle I had to cross there. But
yeah,
I watch these shows. I watch these shows like Survivor where they have these food challenges and they have to eat this gross stuff. And I'm always like, damn, put me in there. That's not something I'd have any trouble eating.
Yeah, you're at I want to make sure I say the name right. It's in York, Pennsylvania. The Horn.
Yeah.
HORN. Horn Farm Center. And anybody who's local to him in Pennsylvania. Just this little bit of time here, I've learned so much and been slightly disgusted at the same time. Man, I can't get over the cockroaches. Most things don't gross me out, but I couldn't do the grub. Cockroaches, I'd probably try how you said, but just don't tell me they're in there until after I've done it, kind of thing.
I'll send you some pictures.
Yeah, do that. So gross everyone else I know out too. But again, the knowledge that I'm finding people have with this is quite fascinating and is something that's really piqued my interest. I swear I kind of wish I was in Pennsylvania. I would come and see you monthly and learn this stuff because I really want to kind of, like you said, people's lost so much touch with their land and the planet in general around them. We don't have a clue. I mean, there's times I thought, well, I know what that is. And then you look it up and it's like, I was wrong completely. I really appreciate Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say along those lines. For folks that have interest in this, but they kind of don't know where to start, or it feels overwhelming, or we live in that sort of fear-based culture, so we're kind of afraid to try this new thing and get it wrong. Just get in there and do it, and be patient with yourself. When I started doing this years ago, I got overwhelmed, and then I decided I was just going to learn 5 plants, and I spent an entire year just working with 5 plants, and then I felt comfortable and I added 5 more and then went from there. So you got to take it at your own pace and start with things that you know what they are and there is no question, and just start using them. It's definitely not an all or nothing thing where you got to switch to a wild diet. Just incorporate it into what you're already eating. There's plenty of times that we'll have pizza, but it'll have nettles on it or wild leeks or something else. And, just start where you're at.
I love leeks, by the way. I've had leeks and I've had rant, and I love leeks and rant. I love them in soup. Yeah. Well, that was my thing, I think, too. When I started kind of looking into it and stuff, and before talking to you, I was trying to read it. I was like, this is so much that I was getting lost in it, and it was almost upsetting because you're like, which one do you eat for this? Well, this one says it's for that, and this one does too. Well, which one? And that's a very good way to look at it is just pick a couple, go with it until you're comfortable, and move on to a couple more, which honestly is a basis of you should be doing to learn anything without trying to torture yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, John, is there any way people can contact you or any kind of things you want to let them know or tell more about, your monthly?
Yeah, you can definitely look us up online. It's hornfarmcenter.org, O-R-G. And my email address is long, pretty simple. It's educationdirector@hornfarmcenter.org. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody, especially those who might be close enough by that they want to stop in for a class or stop in and see the farm. So
Education Director at
hornfarmcenter.org.
All right, and I'll put this in the notes, and when I post up the episode, I'll also have it on Facebook for everybody too. I appreciate this. I'm absolutely in love with this foraging thing and this herbal thing now. I would love to have you back on again later. Maybe when we really get into some other aspects of it, I would appreciate it. And get in more to the insects. I have a strange suspicion I'm going to get messages about the insects. So.
Yeah, that's a good buzzword, no pun intended. Yeah, I'd be happy to come back and talk anytime.
Yeah.
And I'll if you find yourself in Pennsylvania, look me up, or I'll be same if I'm in your neck of the woods.
It's been wonderful talking to you. It's been great, getting to meet you at least digitally. I do hope to talk to you again soon. Other than that, I'll let you go so we can roll and do our things and just have an awesome day. I hope your weather looks like ours right now.
It's gorgeous today, man. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed Jonathan Darby's interview as much as I did. That's the show for this evening. I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank you for your continued support. Be watching the Facebook page and the Town Hall group where I'll be posting up the new episode as soon as it's published. Remember, we are now on some new podcast players. We're now on Apple's iTunes, on SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, Overcast, and Breaker. Please subscribe to the podcast, share it to friends and family, leave a positive review and a 5-star rating if that's something you would like to do. And remember, we're always looking for stories, everything from the art to the weird. If you have a story or an unusual encounter you would like to share, contact us on the Facebook page at facebook.com/Appalachian Anomalies Podcast, or email me at appalachian.anomaly@gmail.com. So if you have any of those stories that your grandparents told you and passed down and you want to pass along to the world to share and preserve for our Appalachian generations to come, please feel free to message me. I will love to share them. And if you have a strange or paranormal encounter and you're not comfortable letting everyone know who you are telling the story, that is perfectly fine too. You will remain 100% anonymous. Contact us, give us your stories, let us share them for everyone else to hear and enjoy as much as we do. I want to say thanks again and have a wonderful night.
Yeah.